Melanie, how are you?
Saeed, crazy, another episode.
They love these. This is a special episode right here.
It sure is.
What do we call these?
Masterclass.
Masterclass.
No affiliation.
Oh,
Masterclass, the subscription. This is the two writers talking shit masterclass. Let's be clear.
Yes. Let's be very, very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, another amazing guest, screenwriter, director, creator, showrunner, documentary creator, and Kansas City Chiefs fan, and my mentor, Aaron Thomas.
You buried maybe the most important Saeed in the last one. I've had the honor of working with Saeed and watching Saeed's rise. So that certainly is a pleasure, and it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Man, we appreciate it. I met Aaron through Mentorship Matters program. I ended up, entering as I did everything. I think I was even in a Nickelodeon program. Funny story, when I got in, I was scared that Nickelodeon was going to kick me out because a Deadline article dropped. I almost didn't even post it on Instagram, Mel. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because I was like...
Oh, you thought you had a non-compete clause with fellowships?
I thought Nickelodeon was going to be like, what is this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But dare you step on Nickelodeon?
I know.
Step on Nickelodeon.
I know.
No, fellowships are like promo codes. You can just stack them at the checkout,
Okay. I didn't know that. I was a novice. So anybody out there, you can enter multiple.
You're making Nickelodeon sound real gangster, though. I appreciate that.
It was, man. I was worried. I ain't gonna lie.
Nobody knows with Nickelodeon.
Nobody knows this story either. I was literally scared, but I posted it anyway. Shout out Rael Tucker. She read my script and she was like, I think you might be a drama writer, which was crazy for me at the time because I was in Nickelodeon as a comedy writer. And she was like, I think you should meet Aaron Thomas. And I was like, oh shit, because I had already, been following him and looking at some of his work and S.W.A.T. and it's the coolest dude. Somebody that I definitely generous with his time. He's somebody that I always hit up and ask for advice, and he always there. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Saeed, obviously, in addition to being a people person and being, easy to like and easy to talk to, also is really diligent with his craft. So that makes it easy anytime you're working with somebody who's focused and has a real sense of what he wants to do. So.
And shout out Mentorship Matters. I think they're doing it again this year. So if you're an upcoming writer out there, the dope thing about this program is they align you with a mentor, a professional in the industry, one-on-one. And so to me, it's one of the best fellowships out there. So be on the lookout. All right, let's just get right into it. Y'all can't see, but he's wearing a Kansas City hat. The Chiefs. Shout out Patrick Mahomes. Y'all won the Super Bowl again, right? Am I correct?
We did.
Man.
Back to back.
I was so hurt, but I'll get past that. How has Kansas City influenced your voice and the type of stories you want to tell?
I'll start by saying I think that every writer gets influences, of course, from different places. So where you're from doesn't always necessarily determine how you write. But certainly in my case, there's a lot of growing up. When I tell people where I'm from, especially people on the coast who don't seem to know what's going on, that's not on the coast, I tell them stand in front of a map of the United States, close your eyes, put your finger directly in the center of the United States, and that's where I'm from. And there's a lot of advantages to that. I've lived in different places as an adult, lived in New York and worked out of Brooklyn for a while, lived in LA for a long time, went to school in Atlanta, visited the Northwest a ton, spent a lot of time in Texas too. And what I can say about the Midwest is it provides a few different things. First of all, it's a cross section of almost every part of the U.S. So you get a little bit of Southern culture. You know what it is to what Oklahoma and Texas is. You get a little bit of West Coast, certainly, especially L.A. and you get a little bit of that city vibe because where I'm from in Kansas City, it's an urban environment. But there's also kind of a chip on your shoulder that you grow up with because anybody you meet from so-called big cities from either side of the country automatically feels like they're better than you. Feels like they're from a place that definitely is more of a place than where you're from. So much so that they often have no idea of where you're from and don't care to learn. So I take great pride when I go to New York, for instance, and I know more about New York and New Yorkers than they could ever know about me because, like, as a writer, I want to be able to write different voices, right? So it allows me to be an observer and a person who can pick up on different ways that people talk, different ways that people tend to behave, I think, in a way that might not be the same if I was from a so-called big market where I don't have to give a fuck about anything outside of that market. There's a bit of that chip on the shoulder too, because you feel like you have to prove yourself wherever you go, whether that's Chicago, New York, LA, Atlanta, wherever, you're always the underdog. So there's that element of, you're going to get overlooked, even more so if you're a person of color, even more so if I'm a person of color and I'm a dude. Although I think my sisters and my female counterparts might have it even tougher in many ways. But there's all of those elements that lead to motivation, where it feels like, all right, well, whatever I step into, I have to work, yes, that much harder. But also there's motivation because I know I'm going to be discounted just for a variety of different reasons. And that's cool. It actually provides motivation where I prefer that over, being the favorite son, so to speak. So in that regard, it influences a lot. In the regard of having a lot of different cultural influences pass through that area, it influences a lot for sure. And then there's the historic element, which I won't go too deep into, but that's basically where the battle lines have always been drawn in the United States, going back to the Civil War. Where I live, Kansas was a free state, Missouri was a slave state. The first battles for the Civil War happened right there where people started dying. That persists to this day. My family is a Black family, moved to Kansas because it was a free state. A lot of that influences what I'm doing, what I write about now even. So that area has for a variety of reasons, has a profound effect on what I do, how I write, what I choose to write about. That answer your question?
Hell yeah. Masterclass.
Yeah, we can definitely tell that Aaron is a professor. We are absolutely getting schooled. So speaking of school, are we correct in thinking that you went to USC for film school?
Yes. Proud alum of USC. That's what brought me out to the West Coast. Was USC Film School. I went to, in particular, the graduate screenwriting program. Although I'm tight with a lot of the programs there, I just did a thesis committee for the Stark producing program just this past week. So what I learned at SC, which was very valuable, was it's not so much as you learn how to write because you have that talent and theory coming in, but I definitely learned structure and I learned how to fix stories that don't work. So I compared to going to like car mechanic school where you might have the talent to build a really cool engine, but when something breaks down, what film school allowed me to do is be able to diagnose right away what happened, what's wrong with this, why isn't it working, and at least be able to try to come up with solutions. And then also, peers. There's at SC, what I was able to do, I grew up in the middle of the country. I had no connections. I had zero. And when I say, I'm not being facetious, some people say I have no connections. What they mean is they have one uncle that works. I knew no one, not even in the city of Los Angeles. So what film school allowed me to have was I was able to build up friendships, people that live here, people that work in the business, a familiarity with, just the start of a familiarity with how the business works, and then access, being able to actually work as an assistant, as an unpaid intern in various different capacities. I wouldn't have had that, except for film school. So I was basically paying for access that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And then along with my peer group, a lot of my first jobs came through those friendships. So ultimately, it was coming out, going to film school that allowed me access and allowed me opportunities to at least start this whole thing. And for that, I'm always really appreciative.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that's really interesting to think about film school as like not just a place to learn your craft, but also a place to like build your network and like build your community and like build the roadways to like future employment in the industry.
Yeah, it can be, and of course, there's a billion different ways to do it, right? So film school is not the be all end all, and there's people that learn oftentimes by doing, and people that go off and make their own films and learn that way, and so there's no right or wrong way to do it. But for me, coming out with no connections, it definitely helped. That social circle, that whole thing of who you know,
Yeah.
that was vital for me because I had no one. And so film school is really helpful in that regard.
I agree. Even I did mine on Zoom, sort of, when I did the UCLA TV program. But my first paid gig came from a teacher. Shout out to Kelly, but she was the one that got me my first feature writing assignment, was being in that class, and that was outside of just the knowledge I learned. So I definitely feel like it's weird. We live in a time where people kind of say, there's this argument about, do you need school or do you not need school? But I seen people who were successful without it, and some people who needed it. I definitely needed it because I needed due dates. You know what I'm saying? If I didn't have due dates, it just wasn't gonna get done.
Yeah, there's the structure certainly of having deadlines and accountability can help a ton as well. And it's to each their own, because when I kid my friends from New York or LA, and if I have a friend from one of those cities kind of like, yeah, I grew up with nothing. I'm like, nothing? Are you sure? You either had Hollywood in your backyard or you had Broadway in your front yard. Yeah. That ain't nothing. Nothing is if you grew up in the middle of Idaho and there is nothing around within 1,000 miles that has anything to do with entertainment, and you're poor and nobody's looking at you. That's a little closer to nothing. Even still, you grew up in the United States, so you ain't completely without nothing, but you know what I'm saying? So it can be helpful in that way. If you need resources to try to get a start, that's where there's an advantage there.
We did some research because, two writers talking shit. We like to do a little digging.
Okay. Bring it on. Talk your shit.
Is it true that you started out as a writing assistant on the show Soul Food? Is this true, or is this urban legend?
It's a partial truth.
Okay.
Because technically I started as an unpaid intern on Soul Food. So I came in, my story with Soul Food was I was in film school at the time. I was during a period of time where it bought me opportunity to try out different things, almost like appetizers. So I could go intern as a PA on a set of a movie. I interned as a development executive's assistant. I interned as a gopher where I'm getting lunches for, president of a studio. I'm interning as different positions. Mm-hmm. Allowed me to check off a bunch of boxes as to, I know there are definitely things that either I'm not good at or I don't want to do. Cool. That simplifies things. But one of the internships that I did was for a TV drama, and I saw an opening for a show that I actually watched. And Soul Food was a show about an African-American family on Showtime. And it was one of the few, I think it was the only Black drama, meaning like a drama where there's mostly Black faces as the main characters and Black creators behind the scenes. It's the only drama at the time that I knew that involved people of color, in particular Black people, who were a big part of the vision and the voice of the show. There's another show, Resurrection Boulevard, which was about a Hispanic family, and that was on at the same time. They were like the only two. But when I saw that there was an opening, they were looking for an intern, to me, it was a no-brainer. So I took that really seriously, so seriously. My story for that is that I went in for an interview, one unpaid internship. I got there early, like 30, 40 minutes early. I was wearing a 3-piece suit.
Oh my God, that's amazing. You mean with a vest? You're talking.
I mean everything, because I'm still going off of my mind of like when there's a job you want and you take it seriously. And where I'm from in the Midwest at the times, like you dress in a suit, you dress in your
show up, show out, yeah. Show up.
And first of all, I kept getting strange looks, looking at me like I'm a weirdo. And then second, the first thing that I got when I went into my interview with a mentor of mine, Charles Holland, who at the time was one of the showrunners of the show. And so I think the first thing he told me is that you realize you don't have to dress like that, right? And I think what happened is I was dressed like an accountant. So people assumed I was there to audit the show or something. But I found out real quick, again, one of the rules in Hollywood is the dress code. You know, you never wear a 3-piece suit unless you're some kind of old producer from like, you know, the 1950s, or maybe you're going to a funeral. But other than that, you know, I'm learning now kind of what it is. But the sincerity and definitely like how serious I took the interview went a long ways, and I was able to get that internship. And then, and I was fortunate because I landed in a place where, yes, it's an internship. So you're you're making copies, you're getting lunch, making signs for the office and all of that kind of thing. But at the same time, they allowed me access. So I'm allowed to sit in the writer's room, you know, at times. I can say this now, though at the time, I think it probably would have gotten some people in trouble, but they even allowed me to write a scene or two, you know, just to try it out. Now, the scenes did not make the episode.
That's tight.
But they allowed me to like try it out. And so all of these things are unprecedented. I'm getting a sense of like how writers work, how they collaborate off of each other, how a scene works, just what TV writers do. And that was for me, like, that's where the light, you know, it's where you get struck by the lightning, so to speak. That's where I got bit by the bug, where it felt like TV writing is a pretty good way to earn a living. If this is like your job every day, is to come in, collaborate, bounce ideas off each other, and still you get to go home. And if you want, you can work on other things. It's pretty good. Not a bad day job, so to speak. And then off of that, I at least did a good enough job as an intern where they asked me back to be the writer's assistant. And that's how I got the writer's assistant gig. But that was off of a year working for free, basically.
Wow.
It all started with a 3-piece suit.
That suit that burned shortly thereafter. So.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
That's amazing. So can you tell us about being in the CBS TV Fellowship? And shout out to Carol Kirshner. We are huge fans of hers here.
Yeah, she was on the show too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, as you guys already know, and I'm sure your audience already knows, and a lot of people already know, Carol's the best. So she's an industry mentor, industry mom, industry inspiration for a lot of people. Of course, the program now, you know, is developed to where it's now the Paramount Writers Mentoring Program. But at the time when I entered, which was many moons ago, it was a CBS program. My experience there was that I started off my career. I was fortunate that I was able to get that internship with Soul Food and become a writer's assistant. And I thought, since technically I was getting paid from the industry, like I'm in. I entered that door, I'm in, I'm good. But I was a writer's assistant on Soul Food for the final season. And what I realized is that, all right, once that show ends, everybody's back to square one in a way. Everybody has to look for new jobs, and that includes you, lowest man on the totem pole. And so that sent me in a bit of a search. What do I do now? It's not like there's a bunch of writer's assistants positions open. I did a few years where I was working day jobs. I was working everything from road construction to the most boring job I've ever done, which was I was doing quarterly taxes for a real estate insurance firm in downtown LA.
Damn.
And I was doing that because it had great benefits. But that's about as far away from creativity as I've ever been. All numbers. It's just numbers all day, every day. But anyway, I say all of that to say that really inspired me to try to figure out a way to actually really get through that door. And so I started looking at, a friend of mine had done the CBS program prior to me, and she kept hounding me. You should try this. And this is a friend who I met in film school. So again, it goes back to that. You should try it. Look into it. Okay, fine. No, seriously, try it. Have you looked into it? Okay, cool. Got it. A few months later, have you tried? Have you gotten your stuff together? Okay. So finally, I have and I was fortunate enough to get in. What the CBS program provided for me was, and these are all steps, right? Film school gave me kind of the opportunity to break things down script-wise. Then the CBS program was kind of like a finishing school. It allowed me to understand the business side a little bit more. What is it to take a meeting? How does a meeting how do you conduct yourself in a meeting? What do you say? What do you not say? How do you dress? What's the difference between a meeting with a showrunner, let's say, and a meeting with an exec? What's the difference between a meeting for development, let's say, and a meeting to staff? All of these types of things. And that's also in addition to getting a sense of how a network works. Who are these people whose names I'd read about? What do they actually do? What is their power to gatekeep or not? All of those things. That's in addition to writing a new sample, gaining a mentor on both the writing side and also on the executive side. And I know since I've left, it's really developed into a place where, they have a lot of more room setting, mock scenarios where you're able to kind of figure out how chemistry works in a room. And again, the do's and don'ts that you normally don't hear. Basically, what that program allowed was a lot of the advice and insight that you just don't get anywhere else, that you're never going to get on the show because no one's going to stop and tell you. And you're never going to get in film school because you're talking about craft for the most part. This was all other stuff that's in between the lines, that mysterious stuff that you don't know about, but can begin or end a career unless, you're familiar with it. And so I was fortunate enough in that program to sign with my agent, who's still my agent.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's tight.
I was fortunate enough to interview for my first staffing job, Friday Night Lights. Got an interview through CBS, and I was fortunate to meet many people who I consider to be lifelong friends, both in my class, in classes before me, and in classes since. There have been many writers through that program that I've worked with, who have worked for me. Some of my former assistants have gone through that program now. So it's just, I consider it to be a great opportunity, especially for writers, underrepresented writers, who are looking for access. Kind of, you're ready to do it, but you don't yet have the access or that knowledge to kind of make the most of getting through the door. That's what it tends to be perfect for.
Yeah, I am a product of a fellowship, so I'm always talking about fellowships. I think the best thing I did early on was entering fellowships as soon as possible. I'm going to pivot from the question I have here because I know we do want to talk about Friday Night Lights, and I'll let Mel get into that one. But general meetings and meetings in general, do you have any advice for upcoming screenwriters out there, like what they should be doing to prepare for their meetings? I know you have told me some, but I want to share it with them. How do you approach, or how did you approach general meetings? Because now you show up as Aaron Thomas, who created S.W.A.T. So it's a little different for you, but how do you have any advice for writers preparing for general meetings?
I can tell you what I wish I had known, some years ago, and what I wish I had known or thought about a little bit more is, I think any meeting that a writer has, it's a two-way street. It's not just someone who might potentially hire you or work with you. It's also, do I want to work with that person? So in looking at it that way, I think research is such a big component to these meetings, to know what you're walking into. Who is this person? What have they done? What have they, not just their credits though, because they might have fantastic credits, but what's their way of working? Who are some of the people they've worked with? To be even more specific, I'm a Black male, right, from the Midwest. When I'm going into a meeting, I often want to know from the person I'm meeting with, where are they from? Have they ever worked with Black males before? Did that work out? Did it work out for very long? Did it end well? Have they ever worked with anybody like me before? If not, why not? And if not, why am I being brought in? Am I, an attempt to try to reconcile that? Or am I like, a new chapter? These are things that I think about. I want to know if that person is a mentor type, or are they more of a kind of a professional who expects you to do your job and they're going to leave you alone? There's no right or wrong to it, but it's good to know before, going in. Where do our interests align? Yes, I'm from a particular place. There are particular views in the world I may have, but you have a cross section with almost everybody you meet, right? Some type of thing. If for nothing else, then you're both alive and you're both humans. But what are the other details that where your interest may align with that person, where you can buy, you can find and to try to connect with them. And then, of course, whatever you're meeting with them on, if it's general, it's general. You're talking to them and you're just trying to get a sense of, whether or not there's a connection. If it's on a particular project, then I'm curious to know what that person's connection is to that project. Why are they telling this story? What interests them about it? And, when I go in, what I want to talk to them about, I'm going to have my own questions, but I want to hear from them as well what their specific passion source is for whatever they're working on. So that's a lot to say that I think advanced prep is stress advanced prep. And I mean, kind of going really in depth as much as possible. Even if I found out I have a meeting tomorrow, let's say, and I only have 24 hours, I'm going to do as much as I can, find out about who this person is, who I'm going in to meet with. I'm going to over prep because most of the stuff we're never going to end up talking about, but I still want to know, because for all I know, we may end up talking about their love of having 5 dogs, on their we might end up there. I want to know that as much as possible. I might watch interviews that they've done. I don't consider it stalking if it's research. I'm not like trying to delve into like their deep personal secrets or anything, but I am trying to get a sense of their voice. How did they answer certain questions? How do they approach worldviews? We might disagree on certain things. That's okay, but I want to have a sense of like where they stand. So advanced prep, I believe in that heavily before going into a meeting. And then with the meeting itself, I always look at I think it's best to kind of just remember context. I don't think any meeting is the be all end all. The world's not going to end if you don't get this job. You go in prepared, try to have a good time. It's basically like meeting a possible new friend, is the way I look at it. And I think the more you're able to kind of look at it, it's like, I'm gonna have fun with this. I'm gonna go in and just talk, have fun with this. Then a lot of times it can take the kind of the curse off of making it too precious, being too nervous with it. So that's the way I approach it. And I feel like at the end of the day, if you've done all of that, you've done the prep and you're confident in it and you're having a good time, no matter what coming out of that, it feels like, all right, I'll put my best foot forward. I know that. That's all I can do. And we'll see what happens. 9 times out of 10 is going to be enough, by the way. If you've done that, you've probably left a good impression. And then it's just a matter of, is there anything else is it a fit if it's a job, or if it's a genuine connection, if it's a relationship, moving forward. And that's all you can do, really.
Yeah, lately, I'll tell you what's interesting is like lately what I've been doing also is like doing like an icebreaker. Kind of being the first person, like not talking a lot. You should never do all the talking in a meeting, but like, like when that Zoom come up, because a lot of these meetings are coming in Zoom, like I would talk about your Chiefs and talk about football for a minute. And then that just happened. I was on a meeting and I had my Yankees hat on. So then we start talking about the Yankees and the person, they are a Yankees fan. And then it's, you can't see Aaron shaking his head right now, but it started off, instead of, it got rid of any tension I felt, any nervousness, and we just talking about regular stuff, and then you get into it and you might be able to find some in common. So lately that's kind of been the approach I've been doing, is like looking what's in their Zoom window, and if there's nothing in the Zoom window, then I'll just talk about what I just did. Like, I
think also, I mean, Saeed is a people person, so I think certain things come easy to you where many writers are introverts, where it's not necessarily natural for many writers to kind of be empaths, where you're connecting and you're picking up on people's vibes. But so much of meetings is that in the first 5-10 minutes. There are some meetings where you pick up right away, oh, this is going to be a conversation. I can talk to this person. We can talk about whatever. We talk about food, talk about travel, talk about cities that we've been to, whatever. There are some meetings, though, where you may pick up right away, and that's where you got to be attuned, where it's like, oh, this person wants to talk. This person wants to hear themselves talk. So in this meeting, and I try to keep my sports analogies to one per day, but this will be my one. but I might have to be more of like a facilitator, right? This person wants to talk. They like to hear themselves talk. So I'm going to, pop in a couple of things and then let them go. I got a job once by doing that. We're a showrunner where I knew within the first 5-10 minutes, oh, I think I have this job. I think, I'm going to let them know who I am. I'm going to like supplement it with the things, the compliments they're giving me, but I'm going to let them run with it. I'll mention a couple things I know that they're interested in, and let's fill it out. And I got that job based on, I think, knowing and realizing, recognizing though, that's what that showrunner, that's their personality type. And then there are other meetings where you'll pick up right away, oh, I have to do the heavy lifting here. This person doesn't want to talk a ton. And if I let this go, we could sit the whole hour and barely say anything. That's not so great either. So I need to that's where that preparation comes in of like, okay, I want to talk, but also I don't want to just like filibuster, so to speak. I don't want to just dominate the time either. I want this to be a conversation, but I need to be, prepared if necessary to talk about the show, talk about ideas for the show, talk about my excitement for the show, talk about my background, how I compliment certain things for the show. Mm-hmm. I think the hardest ones, and I've been in this position before too, is when you're in there 5-10 minutes in and you're talking to the person who has, in theory, a possible job for you. And their eyes are glazed over 5 minutes, 10 minutes in, and you realize, oh, there's really no point to me being here or that being here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really just going through the motions. But then there's a certain kind of looseness there too, where like, if I've done the prep and then, in that situation that I'm thinking about now, I had done the prep, I'm like, fuck it. I'm just going to have fun with it. I'm just going to have fun with it. I'm still going to talk my shit, And at the end of the day, when I'm walking out and they're saying, great, love to have you and all of that, and I know that that's not true and I know that's not going to happen, I can at least say I know I did everything I could. But reading those first 5-10 minutes and getting a sense of what kind of meeting this is going to be, it's, it can help a lot with peace of mind.
We call that in rap music practice night. That's when you go to the show and it's like 4 people. It's like, all right. Practice night.
Oh my God, I love that. No, I would have that sometimes too when I used to do stand up. I mean, it is brutal to I think stand up and rapping is the same in that like you just gotta fully all the way go there for like 3 people. And like inside you're thinking about every wrong turn you've ever made in your life that brought you to this point. It's so awful. Yeah, I will just say like first of all, like I'm like, oh, I'm not researching people enough before these meetings. Like, wow, I am learning a lot from the Aaron Thomas like masterclass. But I will say it's uncommon, but sometimes a meeting is unsalvageable, like, and I will say that is rare. I did have like one of those this year, and it's always shocking to me because I always just assume I'm going to come into a meeting and I'm like, they're going to fall in love with me. Who wouldn't? You know what I mean? And you do kind of have to have that delusion when you go into even a Zoom room, right? And it was really clear was that thing that you were saying, Aaron, where it's like we're a few minutes in, and I was like, I hope my electricity goes out. I was like, I hope I get struck by lightning. I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. But those meetings are few and far between.
That's the hope. Yeah. That's the hope.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're able to get through those though and still have a peace of mind coming out, you're good for almost any other meeting. If you can basically get to the point where internally, like I'm talking to myself right now. Yeah. Cool. If you're to the place where you can do that and you can amuse yourself, I think it's a good place to be because you'll never ever really be in in kind of a low spot. You'll always have at least an audience of 1. That's valuable. Yourself. Yes.
I used to think that too. I was like, all right, if it's 4 people here, at least I can get 1 fan that'll tell somebody. All I need is that head nod. I'm like, oh, okay, the guy over there drinking his 4th Corona, his head was nodding. You know what I'm saying? I hope he ain't going to sleep, but you know what I mean?
Nodding off. No, I've definitely, one time I did a show, and then I'm just going to stop talking about this. I'm sorry.
No,
We're
please,
here
I
to talk
love it.
about your career, Aaron, but it's like, this has just unlocked something for me. One time I was doing a show and this guy was like falling asleep in the front row. And, you know, I really was like, I don't want to make him feel bad about it, but I do have to acknowledge it, you know? And then there was like a performer who came on after me, and her whole thing was that she performed stand-up comedy naked. I mean, naked. And I was like, you got to wake up. Something is coming that you're going to want to see.
You're trying to help him.
Okay, the amazing Aaron Thomas, you mentioned that through the CBS program, you had your first staffing position, which was on Friday Night Lights, which is like so unbelievable to even think that that is like a first writing job. Can you kind of talk to us about your experience getting staffed on the show and like your experiences like being early in the room?
Yeah, sure. I mean, short of it is, it's one of the jobs I've enjoyed the most in my life. Part of that is, you know, you're brand new, it's your first job. So there's that. There's the honeymoon phase period of a career. But I was also really fortunate. It was a good group of people, really talented writers, but also nice, great people. You know, Jason Katims, who was the showrunner of the show, is a good dude. And that influences the makeup of the staff. So it's made up of really good people: Carrie Aaron, Liz Heldens, Bridget Carpenter, David Hudgens, Patrick Massett, John Zimmern, Carter Harris. It's a really good group. And I found myself early on, first of all, going into the interview, where I was really fortunate in that every once in a while when you're staffing, you'll find a show where you look at it or you read it and you go, even if I'm not on the show, I'm a fan of the show. I'm going to watch this show. And that was one of those situations where I watched the pilot for Friday Night Lights. I mean, it's about football in Texas. We used to travel and play teams in Oklahoma and Texas.
Okay.
I was in high school. The whole look of it, where they're traveling through towns where it's nothing but flat land and trees without leaves and gas stations and pickup trucks. I know that look. I grew up with that look. That's burned into my memory. When I see that on film or TV, which is rare because everything is normally beautiful and palm trees or urban jungle and skyscrapers, I'm like, dude, I understand that in my soul. I understand like that. So I knew coming in, I had confidence going into the interview in that, not so much that I would get the job, but I felt like you are not going to find a better candidate, period. Based on the stories that I can tell. I was a captain of my football team. You know, it was a big part of my high school experience. So I had a good amount of confidence going in and is that I could put my best foot forward at least, and then we'll see what happens. I remember telling Jason in the interview, I really want to work on this show. And you won't find a better person, you know. And I've truly felt that way. And fortunately, he responded to my sample that I had sent in, which is a heartfelt short script that I had written about myself and my oldest daughter. And later he would tell me it made him cry when he read it. I take his word for it, but obviously it helped me enough to get the job. And ultimately, that show is not about the sport of football. It's about personal relationships and pressure on young people, young kids in the town, and fathers and sons and mothers and daughters. And, you know, I get all of that. But it was a job where I find myself in a room with people that are very accomplished, very talented. First day, extremely nervous because it's a job that I really want and I'm looking forward to. But I'm also surrounded by really accomplished writers, playwrights and TV writers. And I remember being so nervous that first day that I most definitely called at least one of the writers the wrong name. And it felt, immediately felt like shit about it, of course, just because I had taken pride in like memorizing everybody's names, but the nerves, get in the way sometimes. But I remember the response, though, which was most important, which was a very kind of like loving, supportive kind of mentor response, like, don't worry about that, kind of a thing. And it set the tone for me right away, where a lot of the things that we ended up talking about on that show, and we were talking about class and race and gender rights and all different types of, topics that I think for some groups might be problematic. I think we handled it in a very responsible, respectful way. And I couldn't really choose a better environment to start off my career because I saw how writers could interact with each other in a really, you know, like supportive, fashion. And on top of that, we were writing about a football team. So it's like, it's just an awesome environment. It's one of the few jobs I've ever had where I was looking forward to Mondays even more so than weekends. It was just fun to get in there, talk about story, talk about characters, talk about motivations. And that was a place too where I was able to pick up on with long form storytelling. How do you, map out and track your character arcs from episode to episode, scene to scene, and now over the course of seasons, which is different than writing a play or a movie. We got to keep track of what these characters are going to be doing for 15 to 20 episodes and how we, mapping that out. All of that was just extremely helpful for the rest of my career. So it's just fun. It was just a really, it was a great experience. No job is perfect, of course. I'm not trying to act like, you don't have your challenging days. But overall, I knew it at the time. And I know even more now, it was just a really rare kind of setting group of people. Just, awesome.
So you're on Friday Night Lights, hit show. When did the idea for S.W.A.T come about? And in that, I also want to ask you a little bit about, there's this transition between being a staff writer and being a show creator, which I think is different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know I hit you up for advice just on development all the time, because it is a different muscle. You know what I mean? So I just want to know, when did you get the idea for S.W.A.T? Was it after Friday Night Lights or during Friday? When would that come?
So S.W.A.T, the idea for S.W.A.T kind of came in two different layers. One was the idea of a character a black man who's caught between worlds, between his neighborhood and between the police force that he works on. I'd had that idea in my head for years, even before Friday Night Lights. I grew up watching things like Hill Street Blues and Homicide and Miami Vice. And I've seen a lot of shows that tried to deal with the human condition, of course, in that job, or dealt with the hunt for super criminals, or dealt with, kind of different aspects of being a cop. And I'd seen black cops before, Andre Braugher played Pendleton famously, and you had the Wire, character, Monk, and you had a man called Hawk back in the day with Avery Brooks. But I hadn't really seen a series that was especially told from a black male point of view that actually dealt with being a black man working that job. And so I'd had that idea for a long time, but then pairing it up as a TV show, that second part didn't really hit, honestly, until I was a higher level writer on Southland. And on Southland, this was a show that was created by Ann Biederman, and John was a big part of it as well. But that was a show that dealt with kind of the realistic aspect of cop work and its impact on the personal lives of the people that do that job and how they take it home sometimes. And as part of the staff on that show, we would do ride along. So you're ride along with, meaning you're literally riding along with cops as they do a day in their job, so you do a ride along with detectives, you might do a ride along with patrol guys, you might do a ride along with EMTs, you might do a ride along to the morgue. But during that time I was fortunate enough to be the first, and at the time, the only writer who did a ride along with S.W.A.T, with Metro S.W.A.T in LA. And we did a raid at 4 a.m. They put me in a bulletproof vest, and they put me in a helmet, and they put me in the back, of course, far back line, but they did a raid on 4 drug houses simultaneously. And what I won't forget is this experience of, it wasn't so much the visual reaction of they're going in, they're banging down doors and flashbang, all of that stuff, but it's when they were leading people out of these apartments, and they were mostly African Americans, everything from a newborn baby to an old man in his 80s. And most of the cops I was with were white guys or Hispanics for the most part. Because I was dressed as a cop, some of the people being let out, I think, assumed I was a cop. And instead of looking at the white guys or the Hispanics, many of them were looking at me. Kind of like
wow, yeah.
You know, like, and in that moment, it was kind of that weird feeling because I could understand both sides in a way. Like I knew what the experience was like on that side of things, where you're the target, you know, and also understood what these guys were doing as part of their job. And so that idea that I had a long time ago about a cop caught between, I felt like, well, this is that feeling I think I've always wanted to capture. And it's with a SWAT team and it's militarized police. And it feels to me like that's probably the best way to do it. And then it just became, all right, in this age of IP, do I need an IP to try to do something like this? Is an IP going to get me further than the untitled Aaron Thomas cop project? Probably, even though it's the same idea. And that's when I was able to at least find out that SWAT, the title, was available through Neil Maritz's company, Original Films, and paired it all together. But that was a series of steps in order to lead up to that. And the idea was to try to do something that's visceral and fun and high octane, yeah. But at the core of it, there's what I call nutritional value. So there's some elements of like trying to engage the audience a little bit, where you have a dude who's not a cop who just happens to be a black man, meaning like he could be anybody. He just happens to have black skin. No, definitely a black dude. He got black parents. You know, everybody in his family doesn't like cops, including his pops. That was a whole decision of becoming a cop and then becoming a militarized cop, and that's a thing. And he has to deal with that in addition to having to deal with, you know, solving crimes and bringing in bad guys and all of that. So that's where all of that came together, but that was a series of steps.
Love it.
Amazing. The ride along alone, I mean, as a writer, doing a ride along, we're not prepared.
I know, like, I'm like, damn, like, did you know ahead of time they was going to have the vest and shit for you?
I had heard it and I had seen vests and helmets before, but it's a different thing when you're actually strapping up and everybody's got rifles and shotguns around you, because you're going like, okay, you still don't know what's going to happen. You don't. Like, you know, they're going to try to keep you as safe as possible because it's not a good look if, you know, little old Ryder got something happen to him. But at the same time, you don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea. Like, it's still going to be spontaneous. So that's where it becomes real, where it's like, okay, everybody's got their game face on, you know, jokes kind of start to slow down a little bit. You know, you start to feel like, oh, this is you know, this could be real shit. But at the same time, it's like, and that's only just like, of course, like a very, very tip of the iceberg for what people, you know, anybody in that situation is going through on a regular day basis. But as the writer, it's just I feel like it's invaluable because it gives me at least a little bit of insight to, I don't have to imagine, you know, I'm not going off of imagining that these people are scared. I'm going off of seeing not only fear, but confusion. In some cases, people handle that with humor, you know, in situations where some of the worst stuff is happening. That's when people are their funniest. These are things that you only know if you're seeing it. So that's where a lot of that is valuable, you know, and I would say that with almost anything. On Friday Night Lights, it was valuable to go to high school football games. Even though I had played them, you know, I'm still trying to go to them, try to get a sense of what's going on there. And then it also depends on the show. Southland was a show where they prided itself on being realistic. Some shows, if realism is not a part of it and that's not really a concern, you may not need it as much. You know, but it was helpful there for sure. And it helped to influence my idea ultimately for SWAT.
Yes. Okay. So kind of talking about like the creation of SWAT. Obviously, we know that you partnered with Sean Ryan on that, and Sean Ryan was the showrunner on The Get Down. Now, my writing mentor, Stephen Adley Girgis, the best, love him forever, was the co-creator with Baz Luhrmann of The Get Down. So I would kind of love to know, like, what was the process of you coming to work on that show? And then, like, I don't know if you already knew Sean or like how you came to partner with him and then like go out and pitch the show together.
Yeah, so the story of The Get Down is a story that is an epic story. At some point, somebody needs to chronicle it. Seriously. I
only know bits and bobs. And being friends with Stephen for 18 years, I can fill in a lot of the blanks.
it's unlike any other project I've ever been a part of, and I can't even compare it to a TV show because it wasn't like like a TV show. You know, it was just an experience. What I can say overall is that I'm probably as tight, if not tighter, with the crew of people that I work with on that show than any other project I've ever been associated with. I still talk to a lot of the writers on a daily basis.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about, basketball and talking about hanging out, and we all live in different cities. So when I'm in New York, I'm hitting them up, and hitting people up, and we're trying to, go hang out, whatever. When they're here in LA, where I'm at, same thing. But to answer your question, so the way the Get Down had come about, Sean and I had almost worked together a few different times prior to that. There were just a few projects where the timing, didn't quite work out for whatever reason. And this was at a point where Baz and Steven had already sold the idea for the Get Down, the show itself, to Netflix, and they were looking to staff up. And with Sean being brought in as the showrunner, basically the person with TV experience, because Steven obviously is a legend in the playwriting world, and Baz is Baz in the feature world. And Sean was brought in as kind of the person who's done the day-to-day in TV. They were looking to staff up, and I think one of the first calls that Sean had made was to me, because we had almost worked together on a few different things. And why he called me, that would be an question to ask him. But I remember, at least in coming in, I immediately had a million different questions. I'm like, wait a minute, this is hip hop, late 70s, Baz Luhrmann, the Australian dude, Sean, and just a few questions. I'm like, this is like. But on another hand, I was like, this is really fascinating though because of that. It's such a weird combination of things. Like when you hear that, you immediately think, oh, that's going to be like F. Gary Gray who's doing that, or Antoine Fuqua. Maybe Spike might have interest in doing that. But when I hear all of these elements, I'm like, that might be really different and unique. And the way Sean had pitched me when I came in for the meeting was basically that. He thought it would be something really special, something very unique. Stephen Adly Gurgis, is writing it. And so there's an opportunity to really do something that's unlike anything else on TV. So in hearing all of that, and also knowing Sean and his penchant for being very generous and also really good about sharing knowledge of how, things work, just felt like a no-brainer to be a part of. And then the journey itself on the Get Down took many different forms. So, we started off writing things in LA. We ended up writing things in New York. It's a whole epic journey and an epic run. But to answer your question, the way it started though was with at least a previous desire to work together between Sean and I. And then ultimately, by the time we were done, I think I was the only non-New Yorker writer on that staff. So it's like a bunch of New Yorkers, a lot of playwrights, and one dude from Kansas. On that staff.
But I think, were you the only writer who went from the LA writing room to the New York writing room?
I was. There were some New York writers who had a place to stay in LA. So technically they were living in LA at the time, but they were native New Yorkers through and through. So there was that too. And there was a time period where when we moved everything to New York, where my commute weekly was LA to New York.
Oh shit.
No.
I would take the red eye Sunday nights to fly into New York, stay in New York for the week, work out in New York. We had stages in Glendale, Queens, which is right next to the Billions, where Billions was filmed.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was done on Friday evening, sometimes I had to leave set a little bit early to make JFK, fly out, make it to LA, see my family for the weekend, Saturday, Sunday night, flying right back to New York. So I thank my wife for that. I love her for a lot of different things, but that was tremendous. But then also I found out just a lot. I learned a lot about New York as a city. I had been there and I visited, but I got to know JFK so well that I had a regular order at the Shake Shack where I was like, how long is your flight? I got 10 minutes, y'all. All right, we got you. Regular, order. And it was like a cheap order with nothing on it. And they had a whole kind of setup. but it was like a regular thing. I felt like Tom Hanks in that movie, The Terminal, where you kind of live in an airport. That was the existence. And one of the great things about it, again, was like there were bonds that were formed. And I got to know the city in a way that I hadn't before, where I was able to live all over the city. Because every time I came back, I could choose where I wanted to live. So it's like, never lived on 42nd. Let me just try that out. And then, like, I never want to live there again.
Yeah. Next.
Let me try out, Lower East Side. Pretty good. Lower West Side, cool. And I think, my favorite places I ended up settling down in I'm blanking on my place in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I'm a blanking where 48 of Mules is.
Flatbush?
No, not Flatbush. Should have come to me in a second. I talk about it all the time. But I ended up living in Brooklyn. I ended up being my favorite experience, though. It was just kind of like get up and go. We filmed all over that city. We filmed everywhere from White Plains to Grand Concourse in Brooklyn, to Upper East Side, Upper West Side, to Midtown, to the financial district, to all parts of Queens. So it was dope. It was a really cool, very unique experience, chaotic in many, many ways, to say the least. But overall, just I think an experience that everyone who Fort Greene is the neighborhood I'm talking about. It was an experience that I think everyone involved in it will never forget. Even though we've all done really interesting things outside of it, that was one that I think we can all point to and be like, I've never quite done something like that before. It's special.
You are what I would say, like a pitching expert. I would say
expert.
You are a pitching machine. So let me ask you, do you have any advice? I mean, we ain't got to go super, super deep, but do you have any advice that you would give to upcoming writers who, number one, it's funny because I think every writer I think one thing I learned was they don't necessarily want the pilot at first. They want you to write a pitch document, you know what I'm saying? And you have to pitch this show and develop it. That was like a mind blower for me because I was always taught what you mean? You write a pilot, but that's my show. You know what I'm saying? So do you have any pitching advice for upcoming writers and creators that they need to start thinking about?
I remember being terrified of pitching at the very beginning, especially coming out of film school. It was just this scary kind of mysterious thing where I felt like everything else you kind of had a blueprint for. If you want to write a script, a screenplay, 3 acts, and TV, teleplay, there are these act outs. But with pitches, there was never any kind of rules. So that scared me initially. But what I picked up on, and I think general rules to follow, I think would be, one is have fun with it. They're buying you. At the end of the day, they're buying your passion for whatever it is you're talking about. So you find what you love about that project and just remember that, keep that in mind. And then number 2 is, I think, in addition to having fun with it, is just put yourself in the audience's position. What is it that you would want to hear that would excite you about this project? If there's anything that's slow or boring, then just take it out. Give them the good stuff. Just cut to the chase. Give them the good stuff. Let them know why you're so excited about it, and clearly articulate what you would do with it. And really, that's it. There are many different ways to structure it, and different places will want you to structure it in different ways. But that enthusiasm and whatever it is you got to do to make to allow yourself to really kind of express that enthusiasm, I think, look to do it. Whether that's a favorite outfit or a particular way you want to dress, whether that's a, type of coffee that you like to drink that gets you amped up, or if that's a particular thing that you're looking forward to after the pitch and that, and that's in the back of your mind, no matter how this pitch goes, I know I get to go and do this afterwards. I get to go and have this meal at this place or whatever it is. It's the mindset, I say 90, 95% of it, so much of it is just mental and just being you can convey your enthusiasm to the audience. And 9 times out of 10, if you're able to do that and do that in a way where you can articulate, clearly communicate what it is, then you at least have a good pitch. And then it's a matter of, where the buyer's at and, what the opportunity is. But those are my generals, those two.
Where do you fall on visuals in a pitch? Like, I love visuals. Like, I love to create a presentation that I'm doing alongside, but I also know incredible pitchers who just talk. They have no visuals. There's no deck, nothing.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing what what you want the project to be, and it's recognizing what you want to convey. I think for some people, and for some projects, I should say, maybe the verbal is really where the emphasis is. I'm thinking hypothetically, if I'm maybe pitching a certain comedy where the dialogue is the draw, maybe I don't want visuals. Maybe I'm a performer and I can really convey to you a lot of what's going on, vibe, tone wise, and all of that. If I'm pitching something, let's say the sci-fi, and I need to show you world building, I gotta have visuals.
Mm-hmm.
I have to. It's not good enough to just say that we have a spaceship that's on, 3 moons. It helps to have a visual to see that and what the context is of that.
Mm-hmm.
You want to paint a picture either way. It's just a matter of what's most effective to paint that picture, and what does your project do? What are the strengths, of the project? I tend to use visuals, especially on Zoom, just for a practical reason, where I think that if you're sitting, any of us who've been in Zoom meetings, if you're sitting there longer than 5-10 minutes and you're staring at somebody's mug, your eyes start to wander. You want to, and that person might be really interested, but you just want to just to shift in your seat a little bit, just to kind of keep yourself alive. So what the visuals can do is just to recognize, okay, I understand this is tough. Sitting here for 15, 20 minutes. I get it. So I'm going to give you some eye candy while I talk about this. Let's get through this together. And I'm going to give you some stuff that also will hopefully excite you, because I'm not trying to just distract you. I want to excite you. But that's where visuals can be a real help on Zoom, is that you're planted in one place. I understand you cannot get up. I basically have you hostage for 15 to 20 minutes. I want to make sure you stay engaged so it doesn't feel like 15 or 20 minutes. So that's it. In person, I don't know if it's as important, because in person, there's all kinds of things that you're playing with. You're improvising a little bit because the person's right there. Maybe you're talking about the weather for the day, or what they're wearing, what you're wearing, what you just ate. There's kind of a spontaneity to the in-person that Zoom doesn't always provide. But even in person, you're still wanting to give them something interesting. It might be a hand gesture. It might be, the way you move, the way you lean forward, the way you lean back. You get up and start walking. It could be anything, but you want to basically keep them engaged is the idea. And so on Zoom, you're a little bit more limited in the tools you have, but one tool you do have is using visuals.
Yeah.
So that's the way I think about it.
Love that. So I was really excited when I saw that you did an ESPN 30 for 30, because it's a little known fact. I don't even think Saeed knows this. I worked on an ESPN 30 for 30, in my past life, one of my many past lives. I co-produced this one. It was called Winning Time, Reggie Miller versus the New York Knicks.
Okay. Damn, you keeping that secret? All right.
That's a card to pull. That's a good one. Yeah.
So I'm really curious, you as a narrative fictional storyteller, how did you translate that into creating a documentary?
Well, I was really fortunate with that, where, I'd seen the first couple seasons of 30 for 30. There's actually a guy I've known for a long time, Connor Shell, who co-created the series with Bill Simmons, the sports guy. And so I'd been a fan of the series for, like a lot of people, for the first couple seasons. I really liked what they were doing. And I never expected to be a part of it. Honestly, I was just a fan. But when I was on Friday Night Lights, I connected with my old friend, and he was wondering if I had any ideas to bring in. So, and they were doing, at the time, they were expanding to shorts. They were thinking about doing 30 for 30 shorts. So I was like, oh yeah, cool. And I started to think about ideas for what could be cool shorts. And so I think I tossed out things like Bo Jackson's broken bat kind of situation, and with the Royals. I tossed out the the dunk contest between Neek and Jordan, kind of the trilogy. I thought that would be fun. There were a few others, but every idea I tossed out, they were already developing or had already completed.
Shit.
But on one hand, though, I feel like, well, at least I'm in the ballpark. That feels respect 30 for 30, and like at least feel like we're on the same page. And then I didn't really think anything of it until they approached me sometime later. They knew I was a big USC fan, so yes, I went there for film school. But even before I went there for film school, I've been a fan of SC as a school and as a football team since I was a kid. I remember them having Rodney Peete, who was one of the first black quarterbacks I had ever watched. Yeah. John Singleton, the filmmaker, went there, and I always admired John and what John had done. So it was like, that's my school, and that's my team. And so they approached me knowing that I was an SC fan. They were like, we're thinking about doing a 30 for 30 on SC. And at that point, it's one of those few times where even before they complete the sentence, it's like, yes, absolutely. What's up? What do you need? You need me to contribute in any way? We want you to direct it. Definitely. Most definitely. I'd had some directing chops going all the way back to high school. I'd worked as a cameraman as a day job for some years. And so I'm saying that, but I'm also saying that having not directed a feature doc before. I direct smaller stuff, shorter stuff. And so the experience with that, what I can say is, so immediately I start reaching out to people I know who are more experienced than me to get a sense of how that works. And what I can say with documentary filmmaking, especially now in hindsight, in my experience, is the exact reverse of scripted storytelling. Where scripted storytelling, the biggest fear we have is we're sitting in front of a blank page and you got to start, you got to create. What is this? I got to build this from scratch. Build a building as we're living in it. Hopefully it works out. With documentaries, the story's already there. You have to get out of the way and listen and be keen to it and let the story, develop on its own. So these are events that had already happened. I don't have to create this. But what I do have to do is, know what questions to ask to get to the story that we're looking to explore and get out of the way. Like, just shut the hell up. It's not the documentary filmmaker isn't the one who builds. It's more, you're the sculptor. There's a big mound of clay and you're just trying to chip through to get to what this is. You're trying to chip away all the fat. But a lot of it is collecting all of that. It's getting interviews and getting, archival footage and collecting, and then chipping away and keeping what is necessary for the narrative that unfolds. And I think one of the really cool things about documentary storytelling, in my limited capacity, and what I've seen, is that it's a surprise even for the filmmaker. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what that person's about to say when you're asking them questions. You don't know if they're going to get angry or cry or laugh inappropriately. You don't know any of that. So there's this kind of like spontaneity that's just really exciting that I found. And so that was my experience there. And then I'm proud of that project. Like, that's one of those where it's a time capsule for me, because like I was able to get in that film, I was able to capture my film school experience in addition to telling the USC like football program under Pete Carroll, that story. I got John Singleton in that, the late John Singleton, before he passed away. There's kind of, for me, a great kind of full circle moment. I interviewed the legendary sports broadcaster, Keith Jackson, who's like a larger than life figure in college football. I think that was his last interview. We got him before, like a month or two before he passed away. Mm-hmm. I got Todd Boyd, who was a professor of mine at USC, a few other professors I had, a guy named Larry Turman, who won an Oscar for producing The Graduate back in the day. That was a few years before he passed away. And he always said, and he's joking about it, but it still made me feel good. But he said he got more recognition off of that than anything he'd ever done. He'd be walking campus and they'd be like, "Hey, we saw you in that 30 for 30. And he's like, yeah, that's right. So documentaries are great for that. I feel like where it's a slice of life. There's a spontaneity to it you don't get anywhere else. I highly recommend it if you like filmmaking at all. There's just an energy to it that they really can't replicate. Closest thing I can come to with scripted is when you're doing improv or maybe when you're doing stunts, because you don't know what's about to happen. You're hoping like it works out. And I feel like documentaries are that like every all the way through. It's like, let's see what happens. Let's see who we get. Let's see what they say, and then from there, we'll see what we got. And we had other things that were really cool. We got Snoop being really cute. Snoop was fun.
Yeah.
I had my daughter there, my oldest there, when we were interviewing Snoop. And I never forget the thing that stood out to me wasn't even like interviewing Snoop. It was afterwards where Snoop was giving my daughter life advice. And
Oh my
I was
God.
like, that's dope.
That's a dream. That is a dream.
So
Wait, what was the advice? I'm like, I want to live vicariously through her, do anything for life advice from Snoop.
I think some of that's between them, but in essence, he's basically like fuck everybody. You do you. Like know what you want to do, and you do you. Basically, but coming from him is a lot different than coming from your dad or somebody else. So it was things like that was just cool. We got Mike B. Jordan to narrate it before. It was like right before he was too expensive. Right before he became too expensive. And so we had a lot of fun with that because he's like, when we're getting that, he's like drinking some kind of protein drink and working out. And we're like, what you doing all that for? He's like, I got this movie coming up.
Yeah, it was Creed, right?
Yeah, I think it was the first Creed
one.
Yeah. So it was, stuff like that. So it's just that experience was just a lot of fun. That will always, to me, that'll always be like a pleasant memory for sure.
Yeah, no, we coming up to our last question before our last question that we ask everybody. But Mel sometimes calls me the doom and gloom when I ask these type of questions and I ask the state of the industry questions. But I'm gonna keep it bright, Mel. I'm gonna keep it bright. So I'm gonna twist this one a little bit. With the climate of the industry, the TV industry, with constriction, smaller rooms, just coming out of strike, AI looming in the background, fight with AI looming in the background, in the future, actually, it ain't even in the background. What positive, you hear that, Mel? Positive. What positive advice do you have for upcoming screenwriters or screenwriters that newly entered this game?
So positive advice that would say that have confidence that content will always be needed, and have confidence that nothing and no one can replicate it the way writers can. So AI, of course, will exist. I'm sure there will be AI stories that will be told. But I think if you look at the history of technology, the advancements so far, especially when it comes to the arts, it's been more of a tool, ultimately, kind of at best, maybe a collaborator than a complete replacement. There might be a whole industry that's born out of like AI stuff, AI images and AI writing. Does that mean it's going to eliminate what we do? I have serious doubts on that, because I think humans still respond to the human touch, literally and figuratively. The positive, as I would say, is focus on the craft, still focus on the craft, and be open to the options, because there might be AI options that help you to do that craft in different ways as generations continue. But the craft is still going to be necessary. I don't think that's going away. I don't think we're ever going to be able to shortcut ourselves to, good, really engaging art, or even content that makes money. I think, and I'm just going off of history. I'm not just saying that just because, I'm guessing. I'm just every advancement of technology, whether it's, radio to TV, the advent of cable, streaming, computers, different screens to watch things on. There's always a fear at first as to what that's going to mean. Whole part of the industry is going to be eliminated. It's the concern a lot of times. And then what it ultimately ends up happening is, no, it's just room that's made for a new thing. Mm-hmm. Still, the craft of writing and performing and doing these things is still there. It's just there's a few more options. That's what tends to happen. And my guess is, because no one knows everything, of course, but my guess is that's the way things would develop. So instead of worrying about what you can't control, I was still focused on what you can, which is your craft.
Facts. Mel, you want to hop into the last question?
Okay, here's our final questions for you. What are 3 things that you are watching, listening to, and reading and loving?
Ooh, loving. Loving is hard.
Liking. How about liking.
Pleasantly fond of.
Okay, so watching, I started watching Black Matter a couple days ago. Also, I forget the name of the show about the hunt for Lincoln's.
Manhunt.
I started watching Manhunt as well. I've been watching X-Men 97. I'm enjoying that as well. So I'm watching those right now. Not to say that there's nothing else worth watching. I just haven't gotten to them yet. And I've been on a couple of deadlines, so I got things in the queue that I still need to watch. But that's what I'm watching right now. Questions? Oh, what
are you listening to? What are you listening to?
Oh, what I've been.
Let's keep it 100. Let's keep it 100.
What I've been listening to is a lot of Drake and K-Dot. You know, that's been a lot. Like the past week or so. Like literally right now, I have my go-tos that I go to when I'm writing, but I don't know if I count those. Those are things I listen to all the time. Ennio Morricone and John Williams and Tim Burton and scores and soundtracks and things. But with popular new music, I've been listening to a lot of Kendrick and a lot of Drake this past week. Just listening
like everyone.
Like everybody else, and breaking down lyrics. And I bet at this point there's things they didn't even put in there that we're just reading to it and just they're just letting it roll. So that's what I'm listening to right now at this moment.
And finally, reading.
Reading, I'm always tricky with that because whatever I'm reading tends to be research for whatever I'm writing. I don't have anything particularly sexy. I'm reading like this book, City of Quartz, which I've read before, but because I'm doing a story about Los Angeles and the city of Los Angeles and crime in Los Angeles, I'm reading that book over because I'm picking up on different things that they talk about through the years. I'm reading, about to adapt right now a basketball project. And so I'm reading some books on grassroots basketball, especially in the Bay Area. I think Saeed knows.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm picking up on that stuff, and I'm also trying to read scripts. I'll go back. I'm that weirdo actually who will go back and read like teleplays, not just screenplays. Reading like episodes of The Crown from season 1. It's like, how did they describe when they?
Oh, that's tight.
They introduce Margaret's like first boyfriend. How'd they introduce? He came in on a motorcycle. I'm trying to remember how they wrote that. Stuff like that, So that's what I'm reading. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Oftentimes I read and kind of enjoy things for research, which is again not always the funnest or the sexy, but it's fun for me. So it's not often, especially with the reading, it's not often that I'll just be reading a book just to read a book. It's almost always like I'm reading it because I'm into that world, writing in that world, or about to, or thinking about it. So that's
smart. Always be a student. Aaron Thomas, we appreciate you. We thank you. We're glad we finally got you on here. The master class is very rare space. So glad to have you in that Hall of Fame for us. Mel.
Okay, now we have a little bit of news.
Yeah.
I am going to be doing a mentorship with Coverfly.
Okay.
It's a 6-month career mentorship, which means that I'm going to be mentoring you in your career, not in your personal life. Don't ask me for advice in your personal life. It is an official mentorship. It's through Coverfly.
Love it.
So I am going to be the mentor for June. So you can start applying in May.
Okay.
So just check the Coverfly website. It's coverfly.com/career mentorship. And if you're interested in having a mentorship with me, it's totally free to apply. It's totally free to be my mentee, but I can only choose one. So give it your best shot.
Y'all better hurry up and apply. If I were you, I would apply as soon as possible.
As soon as that link gets live.
As soon as it's live. Mel, another good episode.
Oh my God, an amazing episode. This is going to be one of our best ever. They're going to write about this in the history books. Future generations will talk about this episode.
100%. What do they need to do, Mel?
Subscribe, rate us 5 stars, leave us a review. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We love them all. We'll take them all.
Another great episode. Peace.
Bye.
Two Writers Talking Shit is an original podcast created by Melanie Mars and Saeed Crumpler. Our producer is Kayla Guest. Our audio engineer is T. Kelly.
Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you damn well please. All we ask is that you subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and give us a glowing review.
If you're not going to give us 5 stars or any glowing reviews, then why even log on? Save your rants for an open mic.
If you have any questions for us, and I do mean any, you can email us at twowriterstalkingshit@gmail.com. That's the number 2, and then writerstalkingshit@gmail.com.
See you next episode.
Bye.